Welcome back to the show. I'm Johnny Kane, and you've been listening to Open Mic here on WJR. I'm excited about this next one. Ayden Novak, student at Lake Orion High School. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me on again, Johnny. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, always good. Hey, big week for you. Big week for the baseball team at Lake Orion. What can you tell us?
Well, we made a little bit of a Cinderella run. Nobody expected us to go as far as we did. We ended up making it all the way to the state quarterfinal before we lost to what was the number one team in the state, Dakota Cougars. So we beat a lot of good teams on the way. We beat Rochester Adams in our first two games in the districts. We beat Davison in the regional championship game. We just made a ridiculous run. We got hot at the right time and made it way farther than anybody expected us to.
That's amazing, man. That's the beauty of sports, right? Sometimes, when your backs are up against it, all you need is a chip and a chair, and sometimes things play out favorably. How did your predictions go? I know we talked about the your MHSAA predictions. Did you hit on any?
Well, so far I'm hitting on Dakota. They were one of my
Attaboy.
favorites to win the state championship. They're the number one team in the state right now. In the state semifinals, Brother Rice actually lost to them in the game before we played Dakota. So Brother Rice is out of it. Bay City Western is still in it. They're in the state semifinals. But those are the only two teams left that I mentioned in one of the previous episodes that are still in the tournament. Everybody else is out.
Gotcha. Well, baseball is top of mind for a lot of us right now. Obviously, the Tigers with the best record in baseball. That's exciting as far as the big leagues go. And this week, you had an opportunity for the program to talk to Michael Oddino, who is a live game director and worked Tigers telecast for the longest time. He and I worked together for a number of years, but he also does Detroit Pistons, does a number of different sports. We did high school football together. Um, what did you learn from in talking with Michael Oddino, and how much did you know about what his specific role was before you had a chance to talk to him?
I knew very little. I've been in broadcasting for the past few years now at Lake Orion High School, and like we do live crews and stuff like that. And I thought directing and being a producer was already like pretty hard because I did it for some stuff at Lake Orion. But what he does is absolutely insane. His head is always bouncing around between all these live sports. And when I would direct a live sporting event, it's absolutely nothing like what he does now. So it's pretty much like insanity for the entire game, and it was awesome learning some stuff from him.
Yeah, I'll say this. They always joke. So you have different titles in broadcasting where the talent is what they consider talent would be the people with the microphone or the headsets, and then you have the production truck. Well, you'd like to have the talent stop by the truck and see what's going on. But it is, it's not like a vast open space. So you don't just want to be milling around in people's space. But they would always, joke with me that I don't spend enough time in the truck, but they hear everything that's going on. And with Oddino, the thing about it, it's like when we watch, so it'd be like when you're calling a game, you rise to meet the moment, uh, and then you have to punctuate calls, but you can't just react as a normal fan would, where you just yell and then settle in. As the director, when everything's happening and you're looking at, say, 50 different monitors, all the excitement's building, and being a sports fan within, it would be so easy to just get caught up in the action and then forget, hey, wait, I need to call the shots on what's taking place. Like that to me is how that's such a challenge, and something I don't know that I would be able to do, to be an actual director, because you have to be the one level-headed guy or person, individual in the truck while everything else is happening. You know what I mean? It's such a challenge.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounded like. Because, like I said, his head's bouncing around. When you're looking at 50 different monitors, you're focusing on not only what's going on in the game, but this camera, that camera, that camera, that camera. Like they're focusing on everything and not just the actual game, but of course, all the behind the scenes stuff. They got to make sure the broadcast looks as best as it can. It's just absolute chaos.
Yeah, it is, and it's fascinating to me because I know on this program, we do talk to a lot of, a lot of talent in the different roles that go into a telecast, and there are a lot of talented reporters, obviously, and play-by-play voices, color analysts, and all that. But without having a solid game producer and a game director, and somebody solid in the graphics department. I mean, it doesn't all come together the way that you see it at home on television. So anyway, really good interview you did with Michael Oddino, really good. And we're going to listen to it now. Here's Ayden Novak and Michael Oddino.
Today, I'm joined by Michael Oddino, a top live game sports director for FanDuel Sports, who's been behind the scenes on some of the biggest broadcasts you've seen. Michael, thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
A lot of us watch games on TV and just see the finished product, but you're the one helping make it happen live. For those who might not know, what exactly does a live game sports director do?
I am in the TV truck. I would think most people are familiar with TV trucks. If you go to the stadium, oftentimes the big 53-foot trailers are outside the stadium. They're essentially TV studios on wheels. And myself and a whole complete crew, many people involved behind the scenes to bring the game to the airwaves. And it's I liken it. It's pretty crazy, but I liken it to what I do. I'm almost an air traffic controller. A lot going on. I'm cutting cameras, listening to the announcers, trying to follow the announcers. Sometimes I follow them, sometimes I lead them, and it's kind of a little bit of a dance. And all the while trying to get all the graphics in at the appropriate times, doing the replays, listening to the producer or pretending to listen to the producer. I shouldn't joke, sorry. I'm cutting live cameras, really trying to, I know it sounds simple, but to cover the game. It's really all about covering the game. So we may go in with a game plan and talk about all these scenarios, but you really never know where the game's going to take you. And you have to be prepared for that. I tell my guys that all the time, that the great ones adjust. So you got to be ready for anything, because you just never know. So you just see some of the craziest things, and especially like in a baseball game, you think you've seen it all, but you wouldn't believe how many times you look and you go, man, I've never seen that happen before. I'm sure the same thing happens to you. You get into some situations, some scenarios, you're like, whoa, it's crazy. So it helps me too. All the years that I did the Tigers, like I really had to think like the manager too, and follow the game. And because baseball, as you know, it's so situational. What runners are on, how many outs, what's the balls and strikes, and okay, what's AJ Hinch going to do now? Oh, hey, Flaherty's in a little jam. Who's he going to get up? And you got to anticipate who he's going to get up, and so forth. And so you got to think along. You're not only thinking television, you're thinking baseball or whatever sport. You're trying to think what's going to happen next. Anticipating goes a long way. Anticipation is very critical.
This all sounds so intense. How do you stay calm when so much is happening at once?
Well, it's like anything. I might have 50 monitors in front of me and all these cameras, but you kind of, as you do a lot of games, you follow in a rhythm. And I hate to say, I try never to fall into a formula, and especially like in home run coverage. I keep going back to baseball. It's summer and a lot of baseball on, but I always try not to cut my baseball home run sequence the same way. I'm very, some guys are very formula, and I try to avoid that. And like opening day. Opening day is always a little stressful because so much is happening. The pageantry of it, the intros, the anthem, the flyover. I'm always on. I hope we get this flyover. You think you know when it's coming. They're not always on time, and so yeah, it can be really stressful. But it's really fun too for the big moments like Miguel Cabrera and following his pursuit of 3,000, and those are I really have been fortunate over the years to be really part of some really big moments in Detroit sports history, and I feel blessed and grateful, and because I'm a fan too. And I love seeing this resurgence of Detroit sports right now. Led by the Lions were the first ones, and and the Tigers making the playoffs, and now how about the Pistons? And if we can just get the Wings going, but a lot of good positive things happening.
So I'm a high school student, and a lot of us are starting to think about what we want to do in sports. How did you get started as a sports director?
Well, I took a little bit different route. I grew up in Los Angeles, and a lot of my friends, their dads were in the industry, being more like Hollywood. So I always figured I'd be like a cameraman on a situation comedy. That's what I was. But I went to San Diego State, and they had a great program, television and film program, and that's really where I got the bug. And I was in the studio all the time, volunteering. I'd run audio, and I encourage people learn all the different positions. You may want to be a commentator or on-air talent, but it really helps to be able to shoot, to edit, do all that. You be able to do everything and anything and really know how the sausage is made. So I actually, when I got out of college, I actually directed news for a long time, for about 10 years before I got into sports. And that was a great experience too, because that's every day and constantly changing, and that prepared me. They'd throw out stories, or they would float whole segments. All right, we'd finish segment A, and they're like, all right, we're floating the B segment. We're going to the C segment. So you got to be fast on your feet, and so I encourage try everything, do everything, and it's pretty cool now to see the sophistication that both high school and colleges have, the equipment they have. Like I see the Michigan State program, and they have some pretty cool equipment, and now all these student-run productions. They're starting. When whether you're a freshman or sophomore, you could be running camera, or you could be running audio, running replays. You can do all that, and I encourage. Obviously, I get hit up quite a bit from aspiring people on LinkedIn, and the other thing too, you got to network. And I'm not saying it's who you know, but you got to network, talk to people, get your name out there. The more you can network, it's only going to help you, because a lot of people help me along the way, and I try to do the same. And I think for the most part, people, they will take the time to look at your reel or whatever, and give you some helpful hints. And I I think, but I think it's the business is changing, but sports still need to be covered. And so the behind the scenes people are needed. Obviously, the people in front of this, the talent, they're vitally important. There's still a lot of jobs out there with the explosion of cable and sports. I'm pretty sure that on a Saturday, every college football game in America is on TV somewhere. So there's just an explosion. It's not just 3 networks or 4 networks anymore. There is just so many now, with streaming coming along too, and the Amazons and the YouTubes and Apple TV. The possibilities are endless now. There's a lot of opportunity now to get started, and just depends on what path you want to choose.
You talk about getting started just as early as possible. So even starting small, like a school sports or local games, that can be a real stepping stone.
Absolutely. Honestly, that's how I got into it. I was doing news at the time, and I got hooked up with a cable outfit that was doing UC Davis football. And I started doing these football games on Saturdays. And that's really where I really enjoyed sports, because it was my passion. I could combine my love of sports with my love of television. And it was perfect for me. And from then on, so I moved up to Seattle, and I got into it was back in the day, it was called Prime Sports, and I started doing football, basketball, all bowl. I think the first thing I ever did for them was bowling, and they go, "Have you ever done bowling before?" I go, "No, but I can do it." I was gung ho about it, and so I did that early on. And then I got my first big break very early on with the Sacramento Kings, and I'm going to show my age here, show that I'm a dinosaur. But I first got hired, God, it was the early 90s, as a producer director. I did both, you know, but the shows weren't like they are now. The shows have just grown, so big with sky cams and steady cams and Movi depth of field cameras, all the tools, and there's so much technology now in the shows with the pregame. There was no pregame and postgame back then. The shows they're huge now. So now I'm happy just to direct. But yeah, back then it was just a different sport. And then cable came along. And then I remember cable came along, and we wanted to broadcast home games. Everyone's like, what? No one will come to the games. If we broadcast home games, no one will come to the games. Well, I think that certainly has been proven wrong, but people were like aghast. They're like, we can't, what's going to hurt our gate? No one will come, but it worked out.
And you've worked a lot of big events. Do you have a favorite moment from a game you directed?
I mentioned the Miguel Cabrera. That was a pretty big one. I've been able to, I've done playoff games and so forth. One of my crowning achievements that I really enjoyed was back in my days in San Diego, and we did a basketball game on an aircraft carrier. And it was really cool. It was San Diego State and UConn, so it was kind of cool to get back at it was Steve Fisher at San Diego State and Jim Boeheim, so it was a big deal. Dick Enberg and Steve Kerr were the announcers. I think Aaron Andrews was the sideline reporter, and we're on the bay in San Diego. It just looked incredible. We had a jib, and it was just to be able to pull it off to from a technical standpoint, from an operational standpoint, to pull off broadcasting a basketball game from the deck of an aircraft carrier. That was a pretty cool moment for me. Just something that I'll always cherish.
That sounds incredible. Do you get to experience the highs and lows of a game, or are you so locked in that you never fully feel what the fans are feeling at home?
I mentioned I am a fan. It's hard, but I try not to get too up or too down. And I try to guard against that, and I do try to stay locked in and really focus on the game. But obviously, the other thing too, you grow so close to these guys, whether it's Cade Cunningham or Kerry Carpenter or whoever, you get to know these guys and you want to see them succeed, so there is a little bit of that. But even if you get a dog of a game, it could be 11-0, but you still got to keep the pedal down, right? You got to keep going. You can't let up.
How is directing MLB to NBA to NHL games different?
It's the nuances, the pacing of the game. And they always ask me, which game is the hardest to do? And for me, the biggest challenge, you'll appreciate this, it's baseball. And everyone's like, what? Baseball? Because of the pace of the baseball game, they would think it's not that hard. But basketball and football is so linear and just kind of back and forth, where baseball, if you think about it, the ball is hit. It's the one sport you cut away from the ball. Think about it in a football game, the ball's in the air. You wouldn't cut away. Everyone wants to see where the ball goes, but baseball, you cut away from the ball all the time. Show base runners, situations, and so forth. And so there's nothing crazier than when the bases are loaded, guy hits a gapper, everyone's coming home. It's crazy time, and that's where you have to hope your camera guys know their assignments, and you've done a good enough job getting them set up so that you're going to see that basing clearing double. You got to see all three guys come home, and then you got to see the guy at second base, and you need to see the left fielder who may have muffed it. There's a lot going on. So and baseball, certainly the pace of it's picked up too. God bless the pitch clock. That's changed the sport. I'm not so sure about the runner at second, for extra innings, but baseball's done a lot of good things to help the pace of it and so forth. But yeah, I think people are a little surprised when I say baseball is the biggest challenge.
Well, Michael, it was a pleasure meeting you, and thank you so much for giving us a behind-the-scenes look at what you do. It's been awesome learning about the real action behind the cameras.
I appreciate it. It's been great being on, and thank you for your time.
My thanks to all our guests today, our panel of sportscasters. If you'd like to see the interviews that you just heard or think somebody may be interested in seeing those, just go to sportscaster.com and you can find them there. I hope you all learned something this week. I know I did, and I look forward to being with you again a week from today here on Open Mic. Thanks for listening.